hello from the end of what's felt like a really long day in the motorsport and sim racing world. I've got together with Katy Fairman to discuss what maybe you could call a scandal that's unfolded in the Formula E Race at Home Challenge. Turns out, even when we're not going to real racetracks, Daniel Abt can still get disqualified substantially after the event. Katy, so let's talk about what happened exactly, because this started yesterday with some of the drivers, most notably Stoffel Vandoorne and Jean-Eric Vergne, noticing that Daniel wasn't driving quite the way they remembered him having before. And also, mysteriously, his webcam had turned off and he wasn't on the Zoom call anymore that they all share during the race.
Yeah, so the Race at Home Challenge was something that was put on by Formula E in place of actual races. Obviously, we're not racing at the moment with the coronavirus crisis. So Formula E put on the Race at Home Challenge. Yesterday's race was held at the Berlin Tempelhof circuit, and it was the 5th race in this 8-week calendar that they've got. And like you say, Daniel Abt he's proven his success at that circuit before. Obviously, he took the win there and had such a dominant weekend a couple of years ago. But yeah, he wasn't behaving in the way that the drivers had noticed before. Like you say, he had a camera on for the Zoom, but there was a microphone or some sort of prop that was in place of his face, so the drivers couldn't actually identify that it was Daniel. He was, obviously in all his gear and stuff like that, but yeah, that was a big thing that was left out. And like you say, Stoffel Vandoorne sort of twigged that maybe something wasn't quite right, and called him out publicly on his Twitch channel and said, I don't think this is Daniel, and then tried to call him, and Daniel Abt wouldn't answer his phone. And so the suspicion began to mount, and then, like you say, Jean-Eric Vergne got involved and said, I think this is a pretty strange thing. But yes, it was decided today that Daniel Abt did not take part in the Race at Home Challenge and instead had a helping hand from a professional sim racer in his place.
Yeah, so the guy who got to race instead of him is Lawrence Herzing. Or Lawrence Herzing? I'm not very good at it.
I think that's close enough.
Yeah. At this stage on a Saturday, that's not going to happen. Sunday? What day is it? Anyway.
A long day, like you said.
So he actually competes in the Race at Home's challenge grid, which is made up mostly of what you would call pro eSports drivers, whether or not it is like their only job or not. They're people who compete for real eSports tournaments that are run to very high standards and like taken incredibly seriously. So they are faster and much more serious than the Formula E drivers on this sim, because the Formula E drivers are all really inexperienced at doing this. They don't sim race because they're real racing drivers. They don't have time for it. There's only a handful of what you'd call real racing drivers who actually put the time into sim racing, because it's a whole nother thing to learn. And to be getting it anywhere close to the standards and speed of the sim racing guys, they'd be sinking, days and days and days into preparation for this event, which realistically they're not. Most of them are doing 1 or 2 hours, if that.
Well, I mean, we saw when the Race at Home Challenge was announced, how many, like a huge percentage of the drivers on the grid had to actually have these things sent to them because they didn't have any kind of rig at all in their homes or their apartments, because it's just not something that's been on their radar at all.
Yeah, so for all of the Formula E drivers, and fair play to them, this is pretty much completely new. And Daniel Abt told you a few weeks ago that it's completely unknown to him. Like the majority of them have never had something like this before. Some of them are involved in eSports, and a lot of them have sort of investment in eSports as a side kind of like business concern. They're not totally ignorant about it, but they are, I think they all know that it's not because they know the standard of sim racing, even if it's not something they're massively into, they do understand the amount of work that goes into becoming good. It's not like, I mean, I don't want to say it's not like playing Mario Kart, because actually there's quite competitive Mario Kart championships.
You haven't seen me play Mario Kart.
But yeah, it's not something that you can just pick up and expect to be good at simply because you're good at driving a real car. It probably helps. I'm sure they've got up to speed slightly faster than some other people would have, but yeah, they're not experienced in it, and as a consequence, the driving in the real drivers race is of a lower standard than the driving in the sim races race, which was partly why it was really quite obvious that it wasn't Daniel driving, because he isn't very experienced. He's not very used to R Factor or to the mods that have been used to create this race at home challenge. The Formula E car that's in it is not massively realistic, and it's not mapped like a Formula E car. It doesn't have a lot of the modes that Formula E cars really have, and yeah, there's lots of things that are incredibly specific to R Factor that you'd have to be considering, and incredibly specific to the various exploits that you can use within the game in order to be faster and to take advantage of corners and moves that other drivers make.
Well, like we see on not the GP racing series, which is put on by Veloce, that incorporates real F1 drivers. You know, we've had Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, and others. And then we're having these sim racers compete against these F1 drivers and doing better and beating them. And it just proves to you, you know, that these people, these sim racers, spend so much time that they have just perfected the skill, and it's a skill that the current F1 drivers don't have.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, the F1 game is a good example of this, because actually that's quite a simple arcadey game compared to the true sim of something like R Factor. R Factor is actually used as the platform to run some, not all, proper motorsport simulators. So because you can fine tune it in such enormous detail. So the amount that being experienced and knowing how to change things and knowing how to make the setup and to exploit a track is incredibly important. It's like, I mean, it's worth literally seconds in a lap time around the short track at Monaco. Like, that shouldn't really be possible.
No, exactly.
So Daniel got caught, Lawrence got caught, and Daniel has been given or has been ordered to make a €10,000 donation to UNICEF, which the UNICEF relief of COVID-19 problems for children worldwide is what the Race at Home Challenge is raising money for. So that's appropriate. He's donating to that cause that he was meant to be participating in a fundraising effort for. And he has had all of his previous points in the Race at Home Challenge, which I don't think were very many.
I don't think he actually scored a single point in the first 4 rounds.
No, I don't think he did either. So
yeah,
minor
idea.
punishment there, maybe. He's had all of those deleted. Lawrence Herzing has been completely removed from the Race at Home Challenge grid and will no longer be in competition for that. I don't think he was massively far up the table anyway, and it's sort of getting to the point where really there's some clear front runners there. But nevertheless, he won't get the chance to compete in the final 3 rounds. We asked the Inside Electric Twitter followers earlier today if they thought that was fair. Katy, what's your view on it?
So this has pretty much split social media in half. We've got people that think that what Daniel and Lawrence did was totally unjustifiable, that it was shambolic, it was disappointing. You know, this is in aid for charity. And for them to muck around and treat it like a joke, lots of people are very upset and angry about it. the other half of social media think that actually this is just like Daniel Abt. Like, if you know Daniel, or you know of Daniel, you'll know that he's a very cheeky chappy. He's a real joker, and he probably just thought that, oh, you know what, I'm going to try and have one over on the game and try and have a little joke and go quicker than I normally would if I was doing it. Obviously, that's massively backfired for him. But yeah, we've got a split with people thinking that, I don't get why people are taking it so seriously. It's only a game, which I know can trigger quite a lot of people when you say that. But yeah, for me personally, I'm sort of half and half. Like, I can see Daniel's issue that he said to me in the podcast, which is coming out soon on Inside Electric, that he's not very talented when it comes to sim racing. You know, he said that the amount of hours and time it takes to go into becoming, you know, relatively decent at sim racing, he just doesn't have those hours in the day. You know, he's got his own brand that he deals with, and all his YouTube stuff that he's doing on the side. And so he's, you know, he said it's not, he can't justify spending that much time on a sim racing championship that's not going to mean anything to him as soon as it finishes. So I can see why he thought he'd get some help in, but at the same time, if everybody did the same, then, you know, people are going to watch it because they want to see the 24 Formula E drivers on that grid battling it out as if we were actually at a Formula E event. So for him to find a loophole in that and exploit it, I can understand why lots of people are really angry about it.
Yeah, I think there's two different ways of looking at it, and that's partly why some people are super angry, and some people, myself definitely included, are sort of like so I think it's completely right that he got fined and that it's a donation to the cause is correct. Yes, he did something bad, but to me, I see this as about the same as something else you get a fine for, which is not turning up to the press session, or turning up late to a press session, which the drivers are obligated to do. Same as this. They didn't, I don't know how much conversation was had with the drivers prior to this, but it is something that they are obligated to do by the series.
That's actually something I've noticed on social media. Lots of people didn't realise. They're saying, well, why did he just not show up? Like, why couldn't they just get somebody else in his place? But they are actually, it's mandatory that they attend these race at home challenges.
Yeah, and they have to participate. And, you know, that, yes, that it might not sound like very much to do, but actually, if you've got to do all the practice and you've got to try and get good, like, quarantine is quite tough for everyone and has been pretty tough for us all. Especially if, you know, your job has kind of disappeared indefinitely. I definitely feel that. And it's, you know, the drivers are managing lots of things. They've got to stay on top of remaining competitive in a real world sense. They've got to, you know, stay mentally on it and to keep training. A lot of them either living in slightly odd or altered circumstances, or have sort of ended up in a different country to the one they normally live in. They're staying with their family or something. And I think for a lot of them, you know, yes, okay, they're having a very privileged version of it, but nonetheless, there will be challenges that are there, you know. Their lifestyle will have been completely turned upside down, and, you know, they're now stuck at home all the time when they're very, very used to being away and things. And to find the time to do that and the focus to do that and the rigor to do that when you've never done it before, I actually think it's a really big ask, especially because it's week after week. So every week you have to be doing something new. And if they are to take it seriously, then yeah, they have to put that work in. And I think what some people felt was that Daniel wanted to win Berlin, which is the E-Prix that the track was based on. He's won there. It's his home E-Prix. He's German. And so some people seem to think that it was an ego searching thing, that he wanted to get a good result in Berlin. I actually genuinely think he probably just didn't want to do it.
I would agree with that.
I think he just doesn't like it. Because Daniel likes lots of things, like streaming on Twitch. He's been doing absolutely tons of that. He's a YouTuber. He's a very chatty, like friendly online guy. Like he really loves interacting with fans and doing things ostensibly like this, but I think he just really doesn't enjoy the sim racing, and he finds it very frustrating. And I know some of them have had moments where they found it quite demoralizing that they're so useless at this thing that it's,
I can imagine,
the one very sort of like it's, you know, it's like a distant imitation of the thing that they really are good at and want to do. And yeah, I can understand to some extent why, if you cannot get out of it, if you are obligate to do it when you know you're not good at it and you don't enjoy it and you have to do it in public, I can sort of understand why you might try and find a way out. From the sim racer's perspective, I find it much more baffling. I don't know how much money Daniel must have offered him. I assume he paid him, but it must, I mean, sim racing is a pretty impoverished esport compared to some of the others. Like it isn't Dota or LOL or the ones with multi-million-dollar prize pools at all. But I mean, because for Herzing, there's much bigger potential consequences. He could find himself excluded from sim racing competition.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's only 18 years old as well. He's
so I didn't know that.
Yeah. So for him to do something as ballsy as that, so young in your sim racing career, it's I don't think it's going to reflect very well at all.
I didn't realize he was a teenager. And like, I know we do get like teenage Formula One drivers and whatever, but like they have at least a little bit more kind of like management and structure around them.
Yeah.
Like, whereas, I mean, I don't know, maybe Daniel offered him €1,000 or something like that's a pretty life-changing amount for a teenager. And probably not that big for Daniel. Like, I mean, it's a really bad choice on his part. He could seriously find himself excluded from almost all top-level sim racing competition. At which point, bye-bye thing that you were good at.
Yeah. Yeah, no, just double checking. Yeah, he's 18. It says also on his Twitter bio. So yeah, very daft thing for him to do. And although, you know, like we say, he is a teenager, we've both seen the coverage that this Abt story has been, you know, shared with publications and stuff. And everything is to do with Daniel. And actually the name of the sim racer, Lawrence, is mentioned, you know, like 2/3 of the way down these articles that we're seeing. So maybe, who knows, maybe he'll get a second chance and another opportunity elsewhere in sim racing. But yeah,
and the thing is, you wouldn't pick him up as, say, like, let's look at like some of the bigger sim racing programs where there is actually quite a lot of money involved. So World's Fastest Gamer or FIA GT. I mean, the FIA are associated with Race at Home Challenge. They couldn't pick him up for that. I assume he would have to face some sort of sanction for it. And, you know, or the F1 eSports tournament. I don't know if he's ever tried to compete in it. I can't remember the name of everyone who's attempted to qualify for F1 eSports, I'm afraid. My eSports knowledge is reasonably good, but not that good. But again, like, I mean, if you're a brand, if you're, you know, one of the teams when they're picking the drivers, even if he was one of the fastest, you would be like,
yeah,
I don't know if we want that association, because it would be like, oh, Williams pick eSports driver disgraced in Formula E scandal or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Williams won the coverage, but no, they take eSports very seriously, actually. But yeah, I feel like the impact on Lawrence will be much more significant in terms of it lastingly affecting him. And this is sort of why because I like esports, I kind of really don't like that most sports are sort of playing at esports at the moment by running things like this, which the Race at Home Challenge, I don't want to claim that there isn't lots of work being put into it. There's lots and lots of work being put into it. There's lots of like technical and PR work and trying to make sure that everything's set up right. I know how difficult it is to put together a broadcast. Like, even when everything's working fine and everything's running normally, it's incredibly stressful. And to get something working like this is very, very hard. Partly because Formula E have almost no background in doing things like this. When they have run e-racing, it's been on specific equipment and in place. And to be honest, the Las Vegas e-race was a complete shambles even then. And, you know, with big esports organisers and very, very experienced esports organisers and esports organisers who have millions and millions of dollars, if not billions, riding around specifically in esports tournaments, like there's been like back-to-back Dota tournaments running, as far as I can tell, since lockdown started. And they are really struggling. They're struggling to put together the broadcast. They're struggling a lot of the time to make sure that they can connect for interviews. They're struggling to even get the games working correctly some of the time. And they're so experienced at doing this. And I sort of feel that most sports tournaments have probably, or a lot of most sports series have discovered quite how difficult it is to run something like this. Because, I mean, he shouldn't have been able to just run a different driver.
Yeah.
I assume he just gave him his Steam account. So he logged in as Daniel.
Well, this is another thing, because Daniel's got his very, like we said, he's a YouTuber and he's got a background which you'll be able to see if we publish the video of the podcast I did with him. You know, he's got the neon lighting behind him with all the way Abt on it. He's got all his trophies and memorabilia and stuff like that. And he's very proud of that and shows that off often in the back of his broadcast. However, the one we saw yesterday, it was a very, you know, normal looking room in comparison to what Daniel normally has as a backdrop. So yeah, it
was fairly starkly obvious. Like, if you look at the screenshots, it becomes fairly painfully obvious, but there clearly wasn't a way of, because, you know, it was obvious during qualifying, and he certainly could have been booted before the race. And I think the fact that the drivers were publicly discussing it on Discord, which most of them, whether they should or not, I personally think it's pretty high risk, but most of them have the Discord chat that they're all added to going out on their own Twitch. Aside from being quite risky, is, and certainly, like, from a reputational level, that would terrify me much more than the idea that somebody might replace themselves with a sim racer. People knew as soon as they started talking about it.
Yeah.
So I think if there is a scandal here, it's that he was allowed to compete without it being investigated and confirmed that it definitely was Daniel.
Yeah, I think.
And also, just like, I mean, this wouldn't happen in proper esports, because in proper esports, they want to compete because they're the person who's good at it. Like, I mean, I'm sure it does occasionally happen with things like the iRacing licensing system. I'm sure people get people to try and, but there's a lot of methods even within that on like a very basic amateur level of trying to make sure that people aren't like switching IPs a lot, and like they're identify, you have to use your real name, for instance, and like all kinds of things to try and discourage that sort of cheating. Whereas, I mean, it sounds a bit stupid to say if this was proper esports, there would be regulations, but there would be. And there would be some process whereby all the drivers had to confirm their identity at the start of a match. sorry, not a match, at the start of a, sorry, I'm thinking about Dota, but like there would be things in place in order to prevent them being able to do this. And if there is something to be sort of, I mean, I don't say, I think it's super stupid, and I think they did it incredibly badly. Like, if you're going to cheat, and most sport has so much experience in this, if you're going to cheat spectacularly. Cheat in ways that nobody can quite define how you're cheating. Like, that's most sport cheating. And that is kind of the whole art of most sport. Like, cheat in baffling ways that no one can really quite accuse you of. Not bluntly inept and stupid ways that are insultingly easy to spot.
Well, like, even speaking to my brother, because he doesn't really follow Formula E much, but he came up to me earlier today and was like, oh, my friends have all just been chatting on the PlayStation about what Daniel Abt's done. And like, they don't even care about Formula E and they're talking about it. So it just shows like how widespread it's become within such a short amount of time. But he was saying like, oh, was he recording himself doing like a fake lap or something? So he was just like,
so because he could have done that. He could have used something like OBS, or even you can just play video in Zoom. He could have had like video of himself. That probably nobody would have spotted it, and then made damn sure that he was still on the Discord call and stuff.
Yeah, like, we're trying to give ideas on how to cheat, or just heads up there.
Yeah. Like, basically, if you really want to cheat at eSports, ask us. But yeah, the fact is that nobody had even considered putting in measures to stop that. And I don't know actually to what extent they're doing it with the more professional thing, because it's just not problems that you would conventionally think about having to deal with, I guess.
I suppose, like you said earlier, with most esports events, people are racing because they want to race. Whereas with this, you know, like you said, they're obligated to attend these race at home challenges. And quite a lot of people have actually said maybe it's time, instead of having a solid 8 weeks back to back, that we take a mid-season break or something like that. Because I mean, you wouldn't have a Formula E season where we visited 8 places back to back. Everybody would be struggling.
Oh my God. I think I would actually die.
But yeah, people, you know, lots of things are discussed about esports and how sim racers aren't real athletes and things like that. But taking part in esports events is so draining, you know, both mentally and physically. Yes, you might not be experiencing the G-forces and things like that you experience in a regular racing car, but you know, it's still a very what's the word I'm looking for?
It's physically and mentally intense.
Yeah,
like, it's both exhausting, and you have to have the kind of concentration that you would have in the real car, and you need to keep track of a lot of things and be constantly like making adjustments in the car or to the settings and lots of stuff, and you need to be making sure that stuff like your setup is fine, that like you know there is an element of physical exhaustion to it as well, particularly if it's, say, endurance racing, because it's just like the length of time you have to do it. And like there's the I nearly called it fake. That's terrible of me. There's the sim racing 24 hours of Le Mans coming up soon, and like that, the minimum times and maximum times for drivers to be in the car is like a minimum of 4 hours and a maximum of 7. And like that is actually quite a lot to do, and especially if, say, you're on a different continent and it's like the middle of the night, even when it's the start of the race and stuff. So yeah, there's, and I mean, if you look at sort of esports professionals, a lot of them are like, they're not as ripped as, say, the drivers or as kind of like real athletes, but like they are fit. Like there's very, very few of them who are not like really in shape. Because, and it's not like a vanity thing, it's because if you're going to do something, like you can get in something like the MOBA games, you can get a 5-game match that goes on for literally like over 6 hours. If it goes to 5 games, it can go like close to 7. and for the really big tournaments, and you have to be like absolutely on it for the entire time and be making virtually no errors whilst you're doing like hundreds of clicks a minute. I mean, actually hundreds is an understatement. Like, so yeah, it's definitely, it's not a trivial thing to do, and it's something that you have to train yourself to do, and to be prepared to do. And like, bluntly, I'm really terrible at it, and I really wouldn't want to have to kind of like try and put on a show where I was expected to perform to a standard even as me. And my job is not driving a race car. Like, so to be seen looking bad at driving a race car, or looking kind of, I personally don't think it does real drivers or real series any favors to try and force them to behave as though they are competitive in esports when they're not. Like, the fact is that, you know, even the front runners on the Formula E grid are seconds off the pro or the real sim racers. So it feels very awkward to try and treat it as a major immoral sporting incident when it's like, well, it's not a sport, is it? It's a barely regulated online lobby, you know. Like, and to me, I actually think we should take it less seriously. It should be more fun, and there should be more like stupid stuff, and things like they should broadcast more of the drivers just speaking to each other. And like, I tweeted this earlier, but I would love to see like sim racing. That's great. I love it. I watch loads of sim racing, and a lot of it is to a really thrilling high standard. And you do have moments where you forget it's not real, particularly because the graphics are like pretty good now. But I would prefer to see the Formula E grid, like get 6 of them or something, all in a Discord chat together, tell them there's 2 hours where they're going to be testing out Gen 3 prototypes that were come up with by 7-year-olds or something. And some modder has tried to like put together a version in R-Factor and let them like loose on the Nordschleife or something, you know.
Like, yeah, well, like we discussed earlier.
Get the actual drivers and the personalities, which is what people are allegedly tuning in for.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, like the Twitch community are absolutely adoring like Charles Leclerc and George Russell doing things like these lawnmower simulators and stuff like that. And more people are tuning into watching that than when they do their F1, 2019 games and stuff like that, because it's allowing everybody to see their personalities and a bit of fun. I think you also said earlier that you think it'd be better if we get the Formula E guys to do something like Call of Duty rather than R-Factor, because because they
actually play that.
Yeah, exactly. You said in your interview with Pascal that you did a few weeks ago, he said that in the evenings he'd go onto his PlayStation and play Call of Duty with all his mates. So
and you'd probably get a much more relaxed chat. Like if you had something where it was like, I don't know, as I've imagined this format, I want to make it clear that I think this is nightmarish and I never want to do it. But like trying to conduct an interview, like a behind the visor style interview, maybe whilst playing Call of Duty. Wow. And it's like every time you kill them, you get to ask a question or something.
I would ask no questions. But yeah, that sounds good. So Daniel Abt has announced a statement on this morning. I will read the statement that he issued. He said, "I would like to apologise to Formula E, all of the fans, my team and my fellow drivers for having called in outside help during the race on Saturday. I did not take it as seriously as I should have. I'm aware that my offence has a bitter aftertaste, but it was never meant with any bad intention." So that was his statement that he gave, which it's difficult because obviously knowing Daniel, I would say that's not PR, nonsense. That's genuine, that he would not mean to upset or offend anyone by doing this. But then you could say I have bias because I like Daniel. I think he's a sound guy, and I don't think, from my opinion, that he would do anything wrong. But like I say, I might have a slight bias on that. So,
I mean, the incident that everyone is comparing this to is the other big sim racing, and actually I think the IndyCar is more proper sim racing than the Race at Home Challenge. But the other big
hoo-ha
real racing series has an online championship scandal, which was Simon Pagenaud hitting Lando Norris during the IndyCar race and crashing him out. I mean, there's sort of differing versions of exactly what went on, but the fact is that Simon said he was going to crash him out and then did.
Yeah.
Like a somewhat classic Degrassi approach to it. I think the incidents are very different, in that Simon said at the time and told Lando in a call that he was just annoyed at him winning. He didn't think that a non-IndyCar driver should win at an oval, and he felt that because Lando knows iRacing very well and has been playing it for 14 years, he was able to do things that you can't do in real life. But obviously he's not thinking about real life IndyCar, like, because all of his IndyCar experience is in iRacing, and the fact is that is the game that they were playing. So for all intents and purposes, they essentially dropped, although he is a real world driver, a sim racer, into a group of pretty inexperienced, comparatively real world drivers. And yeah, it peeved the IndyCar drivers that this F1 guy was faster, and like, you know, there's always a bit of like ego rub between the two series, and the comparisons that are drawn between them. And like, actually, it was that a bunch of people who don't sim race were getting fairly comprehensively rinsed by an iRacing guy who took it incredibly seriously and had practiced for like days and days and days. And Simon took him out. Well, Pagenaud hit him deliberately. He says he was only aiming to hold him up, but he was absolutely aiming to interfere at the very least. And his motivation was that he did not want Norris to win. And like, that to me is like actively malicious. That's something where you are interfering with the sport to a significant degree. To me, this is kind of more of like a regulatory issue. I don't think that it's great that Daniel did it. I think it's really rubbish. I think it's even worse that Herzing did it, and like, I think he's made a very, very poor choice there. But it's sort of, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, it's not. I mean, okay, I guess it affected the race in the sense that there was somebody of a higher driving standard competing with them, but not much.
Yeah, I think it would be more of an issue if we found out that Maxi Gunther or Pascal Wehrlein, who have gone on to win the races, haven't been themselves and then collecting all these victories. I think that would be more of a scandal in the sense. This is, for me, I know it's difficult because I know lots of people that are so involved in sim racing and they're outraged by this. And I come from a background where I have never really paid much attention to eSports and sim racing until this lockdown. But for me, this feels like more of like that was a silly thing to do. It's not like, oh my goodness, Daniel Abt should be dropped from his race seat, and you know this is going to be.
Yeah, and I do wonder if it will have consequences. But like, Daniel's contract is up at the end of season 6.
Yeah,
get there.
Yeah.
Like, so he is stupid, and this will have consequences. And like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you Google Daniel Abt now, you get about 60 pages of specifically this, because real racing driver pays sim racer to replace him. That sounds like a great scandalous headline. There's not a lot to write about at the moment. So I think like both of them will have long-lasting consequences on this, and it's fantastically misjudged. I don't want to sound like I'm totally reductive about it, but I don't think it's sort of a moral issue. Like, I don't think it makes I don't think it's something where we need to question the fabric of, should you do this just because it's a game or something? It's like, well, I mean, no, you shouldn't, but like,
yeah,
it turns out to be a thing that you can somehow get away with, sort of, until you're disqualified the following day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you referred to it earlier as if you were missing miss a press conference session, or maybe an autograph session. I know, I think it was last year at the Australian Grand Prix, Kimi Raikkonen just didn't show for the fan autograph session. And like, I think that's way more hurtful and disrespectful to the fans and those that have gathered there. I know that's not for charity, but I think that's worse in perspective than what Daniel did on Saturday by having a sim racer take his place. But people will view these scandals in different ways, won't they? With depending on the importance it is to them. But
yeah, I mean, like, and I don't mean this as like a huge diss on Daniel, but I mean, technically, what he did was make the race like 4% better in terms of driving standards. You know, I think the fact that there is a meaningful advantage to be gained in terms of results by putting someone other than yourself in the car is actually like just a problem with this. And like, you know, I really like eSports, and like I am the person who willingly goes and like spends the hottest weekend of the year in a sweaty arena full of nerds. Like, I don't I can't classify the way that, so a lot of people are talking about the sponsors and there's branding and there's like Formula E's reputation involved in this. Well, I mean, like, yes, there is, but already to me, the crisis there is that it's actually like quite bad racing. Like every time there's an agonizing turn one pile up where they're all like glitching and scooting through each other, I'm like, good God, like this is a shambles, and this is what you're putting out as you. With all your sponsors and all of those brands attached to it, when like, you know, like sim racing generally is very unmonetized compared to other fairly large participated in esports, and especially in comparison to real world motorsport, where obviously there's like millions and billions of dollars sloshing around the many and diverse series around the world. And to me, to be trying to publicize something where the races are not the best is like actively a problem, given that, I mean, it's like going to a track day. So none of the Formula E drivers would, I mean, maybe a couple of them might be able to if they really put their mind to it, but at the moment, from where they are relative to the sim races, I don't believe that any of the Formula E grid, as much as they are trying hard, and like fair play to them, because I wouldn't want to do this as them, and I think it's actually quite an unfair thing to have been asked, because it does reflect on them in their real jobs, as it's going to have consequences with Daniel. I don't think any of them would qualify for the various sort of sim racing licenses that you can get. So in effect, what we're watching is like a sports car track day, but trying to slap like the flipping FOM graphics on it and take it seriously when, oh, sorry, not FOM, Formula E. Like, to me, that is making an active mockery of sim racing. And it's doing it in order to, because although this is for charity, it is also in Formula E's interests. It's a way of maintaining relevance. It's a way of displaying their sponsors. It's a way of making sure that they keep their brand active. And so it is something that actually is serving their interests as a business proposal. And so, yeah, I feel like what the dirty that real series are doing to sim racing is in the way that they have sort of blundered into the space with relatively little apparent knowledge of how to run things properly. Like, they've sent all the drivers really lovely sim setups. They look super professional until you see what they're actually doing on track. Yeah. And again, I don't want to be really mean to the drivers. I'm not trying to insult their sim racing. It's just that they haven't put the 10,000 hours into it, or 100,000 hours, or whatever you need to get good.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, I think that we've pretty much covered everything in this chat. But I don't even know how long we intended it to be, but it's ended up being a whole debate. But I've really enjoyed it, and I'm sure that the people watching this are going to have their own opinions. Please tweet us them, leave them in the comments of this. We're always wanting to hear other people's opinions, and maybe this is something that we can revisit. Maybe at the end of the Race at Home series, we could do like a review of the 8 races and discuss this with some other fan opinions. But yeah, I think we've covered most things.
Probably.
Yeah, and like everything else in between. But yes, like I say, if you enjoyed this, please give it a share, leave us some likes or whatever in the...
Like and subscribe.
Yes, that's it. Hazel know what she's talking about.
And I hope you enjoyed however long this video ends up as, of two female motorsport journalists discussing sim racing. Is this a world first?
Most probably. That's excellent. Well, thanks very much, Hazel, and we'll be back with another video on this YouTube channel very soon. Bye.